being a little bit brave and being a little bit courageous there, even when it's uncomfortable. Comfort is great for sweatpants, not for leadership. So at some point, you're going to have
Uh,
to get a little uncomfortable,
I
which is what
love
it could feel
that.
like when you're leading
Yeah.
up and advocating for your team.
Hi, and welcome to the Thoughtful Talent Show. I'm Jen Werner of Jen Werner Coaching.
And I'm Chad Ahern of Talent Teams Consulting. This season, we're welcoming fellow coaches back to the show to explore how people can move beyond naming and claiming their talents and start to aim their talents. We're calling this season Strengths Applied.
And today, our topic is managing up and advocating for your team. I'm so super excited to be here today because we are going to introduce Shaina Lane. Woo! Shaina, it's great to have you back. You may all remember Shaina once you hear and see her from our Includer episode in season 1. But Shaina is a keynote speaker, a leadership coach, an author, a facilitator, and our good friend. So welcome back to the show, Shaina. Your top 5, if I remember right, are responsibility, relator, learner, arranger, and includer, right?
You got it. You got it.
Yes. Awesome. Welcome back, Shaina. It's so great to see you. Jen just mentioned you're an author. I've loved your book. Leadership is Easy, Said No One Ever. I hope I got that title somewhat close to right, but it was a great little read. I really appreciate the book and you coming back to the show. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate y'all having me on this very special day.
Yes.
Oh boy.
So I have the honor of calling out very briefly a very momentous day today. It is Jen's 50th birthday. And so Shaina and I are very happy to have her here. Jen's doing this recording on her birthday, even though we're going to release it in a couple days. But happy birthday, Jen, to my fellow co-host.
Oh, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's a fun day, so we're just going to keep the fun rolling. And let's start with statistics because nothing's more fun to the learner and analytical than statistics, right, Chad?
Right. So we're here to talk about managing up and advocating for your team. And I brought 2 stats to kind of start us off. Based on some research that the Ladders organization did, this is actually a couple years old, but it was one of the most current stats I could find is 88% of professionals say managing up means career success. At the same time, we all know as Gallup certified strengths coaches that only 27% of our managers are engaged in large part due to stress because they are sandwiched between the people that they manage and the people that they report to. And so we wanted to have a conversation about what we're going to do about that. So, Jen, why are we talking about this? I've given some stats. Give us the story behind this.
I love the stats, Chad. So I know I was really excited to talk about this topic because many times it's our bosses, I think, who need the extra attention, right? Like they do all these great things like, oh, you're going to come to this retreat and you're going to learn these things. And then we're like, okay, so our bosses already know this. Yeah, maybe not. So our team works really great together, but maybe our bosses or our managers might be lacking a little bit. I want to just remind everybody they're learning too. So they're people just like us. So in this episode, I think we're going to be really talking about that and like managing up, helping our managers. And we're going to share some tips for new managers on how they can advocate for their team, which I'm really excited about, but also how we as team members, or even as the manager, can manage up to their manager. Like, what is it their manager needs? Those things that maybe no one's given them any attention. Like Chad said, they're the middle ones squished between the 2 groups getting all the attention. But perhaps the leaders might need a little extra help as well in understanding the team. So I'm really super excited that we're diving into this today. So I'm going to start right off the bat. Shaina, I want you to tell us, what has been your experience either with managing up, helping a manager when they have to do some managing up, or even advocating for the team, your personal experience?
Yeah, so I've had, and I was thinking about it, Jen, as you posed this question to me. I feel like I'm in this position a lot, and I don't know if it's just because I've put myself in this position, but I think we see leaders that run the gamut. I've certainly experienced it in my professional career where I've had a really, really great manager who, or I would say leader, who didn't want to be in the weeds. And so she really let me run my shop. And if I needed something, like we talk about advocating for our team, I just had to build a business case, pitch it to her, and she's like, yeah, great, do your thing, awesome, right? So it was really, she made it really easy on me. And then I worked for leaders who were kind of on the opposite end of that spectrum, who wanted to manage and own and control everything, and it was a
Yes.
lot harder to move the needle there, even though I'd create a really solid business case because I had learned how to do that. They wanted to do what they wanted to do, and it was more difficult. So I think, we often kind of run the gamut of what that looks like. And I'd say in this position now that I'm in learning and development, I do this quite a bit when we get training requests. Because, a lot of times we try to throw training at things and it's not necessarily a training issue, right? So
Right.
what we learn in instructional design is that training needs analysis can often feel like pushing back a little bit, but it's really leading up because it's asking the questions to get them to think through, ooh, am I going after the right solution here or not? And we get those requests from people that are much higher in the hierarchy than I am. So um,
Yeah.
we do have to lead up in that respect sometimes as well.
Oh, so good. Yeah, absolutely. And I was feeling like too, like sometimes even having some of those realizations and knowing that we have to like say the icky stuff, like there's some stuff that needs to be shared. And how do we do that? How do we, like get around some of those like icky places? Chad, I want to come to you. What's been your experience with managing and advocating for the team? Managing up.
Yes. So, so I've actually never held a true like manager role where I have a team that I'm fully responsible for. At the same time, I think even individual contributors, even if we're looking that far down in the hierarchy, you need to be able to manage up. You need to be able to talk to your manager. You need to be able to advocate for, Shaina, you were mentioning, advocating for the initiatives or the projects, or hey, we need to spend money here, we need to do this. You need to be able to speak to that. And I too have run the gamut. My first boss, who I will always keep in mind, was fantastic about just sort of trusting that I knew what I was talking about, and even if it was my first job, she said, "Just tell me what you need," or and being open to input. I've also had some leaders along the way that I found a little bit more tricky, and I know we're going to get into talents and our knowledge as CliftonStrengths coaches here in a little bit, but one of the realizations I've had since those experiences is that I don't think I was speaking to them in their talents, with respect to how they saw things. Jen and I have constantly talked about how we come from a little bit more of a thinking and doing aspect, and maybe a little less on the relationship building lens. But I've realized I used to work for bosses that had much more of a person orientation versus a doing orientation, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But that I think is going to influence a little bit of my contribution today, in that disconnect can happen, and you need to be aware of it. And that I think is sort of one of the foundational pieces I'm gonna bring into this conversation, coming out of my experiences in my various roles.
Chad, I love that you're talking about this relationship side, me and all my doing talents. And when I first found them out, I didn't know, like I only had my top 5. I didn't know for quite a while that I had relationship building like stacked right underneath all of those executing. And so I was like, oh, I'm not relationship building at all. I can't do anything with other people. And I will say I am very, very motivated by the getting the stuff done. So for me, it was like realizing that they weren't going to lead maybe like the other manager that I really loved working with, who like had all the plan, had the strategic plan, had all the things laid out to do, had all the discipline, all the discipline that I so long for. They had all those things in place for me to just do. Sometimes they were more about oh, well, let's get together and we all need to feel good about this. And what does everyone else think? And let's collect the ideas. And so they weren't going to lead like the person that I wanted, that I needed. And so for me, that meant learning, I had to ask for that. And that's what I thought was really great about CliftonStrengths, is the like knowing like, oh, this is what I need to do well. So these are the things I need to ask for. So in that, respect, I was managing up. I was actually giving my leader what they needed so that they could give me what I needed. So it was really an interesting like position there. And as far as like advocating for the team, I haven't actually technically been the like manager where I had to like advocate for my team specifically, but I was a team leader of a like cross-functional team. And I always thought this one was a really big, important step to be able to advocate for our teams, because there's so much time and space wasted on doing initiatives that no one knows what's going on or why we're doing it. And so like making sure that we're all on the same page and being able to explain to the manager, like, this is not landing. Like can we come back to your why? And I'm sorry, I'm going to pull myself into strengths already, but I think that was one of those things that pulled me up to like that, like advocating for my team. I also feel like I just have that bend for like making sure other people are heard. So that might be where some of that's coming from too. Yeah.
So Shaina, you've talked about your experience. I'm wondering, we've already started to touch on talents and CliftonStrengths. Jen mentioned your top 5. Obviously, would love you to go further if you feel it's necessary. But I'm curious, which of your talents do you feel have proven most helpful in terms of managing up in your own career? I'm thinking maybe if you can give some examples so that some of our listeners that might share some of your talents might be able to have some takeaways or some things that might be applicable that they hadn't thought of. So I'm just wondering if you could start with your talents and your experience.
Yeah, I think let me just start by saying when we talk about managing up, like to me, that implies some sort of like hierarchical status or positional power, right? Because we manage, when I think of managing, I think of like coordinating work, I think of holding people accountable. While I'm kind of fundamentally against managing people, like managing work
Right.
is a lot better, but we try to
Yes.
lead people, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
But you don't have the authority or the positional power to manage up. So when I think about managing up, when people say that, I think of influence. And that pulls me back into our themes, because we know that influencing talents are the least common. And so what I hear in terms of challenges from clients all the time is like, well, we don't have any influencing things, so how can influence, those types of things. So going back to my top 5, I don't even think I have influencing in my top 15. I'll tell you, influencing lands way at the bottom for me. So for me to lead up or to influence up, I rely a lot on my responsibility. That really pulls me towards doing what's right. And so we often get into positions where we know the people doing the work usually have the answers, but the people at the top are making the decisions. Whether or not they make sense, we don't know. But it's kind of getting into that disconnect of, hey, this is what you're expecting us to do. It's not going to work. My responsibility says, let's not just keep plugging holes here. Like, let's fix the root of the problem.
Yeah.
Let's slow down a little bit. I'm actually working through that right now in my current organization, where they keep trying to plug performance gaps with training, where we already have training. And so I'm like, guys, is this really a training need, or do we need a competency model that we can make some competencies mandatory so people will seek out the learning? And then you've got an elective learning culture. So I'm kind of sitting there going, hey, is this the right thing to do? Is this where we should be spending our time? Asking the questions. And then Jen, to your point, figuring out what's important to your leader. What are their goals? What do they need to accomplish? And how can you support them in that? Again, it builds that trust and rapport so that when you do need something, when you do say, hey, wait a minute, hold on, I don't think we're doing the right thing, they listen, because they know that your ultimate goal is to support them and do the work that's meaningful. I think the other thing for me as a ranger that's always kind of helped me say, wait a minute, maybe there's a better way to do this, or maybe there's a different way to do this. That is something that's always resonated with me. And then, Chad, as you can relate, the learner, again, I'm constantly looking at data and research and best practices and saying, you know what we could do differently? Can we think about this, or can we try this? So I think being able to lean into some of that executing and relationship building can be really helpful if you don't have the influencing themes.
Oh, so good. And I
Yeah.
love that you brought up the learner, because I was like, oh, great. Here we go. 2 learners on the show. They're going to throw all these books at us.
No,
Yeah. Let me
well,
get my stash over here.
yeah.
Yep, right.
Well,
And
before I start pulling books off the shelves behind me, um, I have to tell you that as soon as you start with the responsibility, I
Mhm.
immediately started smiling on the inside, because I was like, wait, she's gonna hit on my exact 2 answers, which are
Yep.
responsibility and learner. And it's,
Yeah.
it's for me, it's the building the trust with your leader by getting things done, committing, fulfilling commitments. Um, and so then when you brought in learner, your answer is almost an exact reflection of what I was going to say, which is supporting my leaders by researching things that they don't have time for. So kind of, they delegate, or they have something in mind, but then how can I be that resource that then fulfills one of their goals or fulfills one of their initiatives? So anyway, you and I are probably talking about the the mirror images of each other. I know
Mhm.
Jen, you know, sorry, one other thing that really struck me is that comment you made, Shaina, about the bottom being sort of the doers, and the sort of the top of the hierarchy, the upper level leaders, doing a lot more of the thinking, the strategic planning, and then not necessarily making the connection between the two. I think that's where we see a lot of our managers, and why I actually brought the 27% of managers are only 27% of managers are engaged right now, because they're feeling this stress of they've got all these doers saying, well, we can make this work. And then the big picture planners are thinking, well, we can do all these things. And
Yes.
the managers have to be sometimes serve as the bad guy or the bad person, but that has to
Yeah.
bridge the conflicting requests. And I think that's one of the reasons why we wanted to get into this, especially since we're now so much more hybrid and remote, where you don't have the passing by each other, the visibility gap. You don't see each other every day. um
Yeah.
and also that Shana, you brought up the idea of hierarchical organizations. Well, in a lot of organizations, boss or leader can mean 4 different people, because we've got these matrix teams now. So
Yes.
so it all kind of plays together. So anyway, just in terms of themes, I loved yours. I'm thinking about the doing. Oh, where'd Jen go? Oh, there's Jen.
Sorry.
She was out starting her birthday celebration, I think. I was like, day.
And I'm
Oh,
out.
yeah. Jen, you have a lot of
Yes.
really great executing themes. I'm wondering what themes
Yes.
you lean on to manage up, coming from a little bit more of that doer lens versus
Sure.
the
Well,
influencing lens that Shana sort of led us off with.
yeah, well, you won't be surprised. Responsibility was like the number one I said. And it was that same statement that Shaina made, that we're doing things right. And I'm going to add to that layer, belief that we're doing the right things. So like we talked to, it's so important to do things correctly and do them right, but it's also important that we're doing the right things. Like Shaina said, like if we're just plugging the holes, yeah, I suppose we'll get there one of these days, but we're missing the bigger point. Like what is the bigger picture? Why are we doing the things we're doing? And that's always where my talents have led me. And I will say it took a while for me to figure that out. I didn't know it was coming from belief. I just am like, well, I don't know. I just know, like, I know this is the thing I need to learn about. And it was that figuring out the why. Why is this important? Why are we doing this? How does it like pertain to me and my own values of how I think things should be and what we're doing? But that keeping things ethical, I think, is that like really important place that belief plays a really big role in that, making sure that we're not just doing to do, we're doing for a cause. I'll say. And the older I get, talking about how old I am, older I get, the more that cause and the purpose has become like really central to what I'm doing. If I don't see like some major things happening with this, that this isn't going somewhere, this isn't helping someone, why are we doing it? And I think I really like the idea of everyone coming back to that, like understanding what your why is, why things are important to you, because realistically, like we're going to have parts of our job that are not important to us, but they are important to the mission. So how can we like determine what that importance is, and then being able to like really use that to help others see that, because maybe they don't see why they're important, why their mission is important. I don't know. That's kind of where I was going with that one.
I can't wait to hear what your response is when you turn 30. Every year
Love
older
you.
I get, I play more into my why. Well, I can't wait till you turn 30 and hear what
You're
you have
so
to say.
Thank you. Well, so like leading into that, this goes heavily into, you know, that audience that is seeking me out, and I'm regularly seeking them, that struggle to be seen and heard. And this, I think, is why that purpose is so important to me. I do believe that's why values coming out is that, you know, we all have been quieted in some way, shape, or form. And sometimes bosses don't realize they're doing it. And being able to either advocate for the rest of your team, if you're just an individual contributor and we're looking to advocate for our team, like what are some ways that we can either for our manager even advocate for them? What are some ways, Shaina, do you feel like that we could help some of those people who are struggling to be seen and heard, so that we make sure that we're doing things right and doing the right things?
Yeah, something that comes to mind as you ask that question is, are we communicating the right thing? So sometimes people who are struggling to feel seen and heard have been asking for one thing, but what they really want is something else. And so there's this feeling of incomplete, and gosh, my manager is really not getting it. I've been asking for this over and over and over again, and they're just not hearing me. But the way they're communicating it and the way it's landing with the leader, probably like you mentioned earlier, is we're all operating through a different strengths lens. So if your
Right.
leader's lens is a little bit different than yours, what you say may not land in the way that, or how they hear it may not land in the way you meant it. And so thinking about how clear is your communication, and maybe I'm a big fan of role play. Like, do you got a colleague at work that you can say, hey, I've been asking for this. Like, can I run by you what I've been asking for? And can you tell me if you understand, or is it clear? Because sometimes once you hold up that mirror, you get some feedback. Somebody might say, yeah, no, I don't really know what you're asking for. You're like, can you say that in a different way?
Right. Chad, isn't that great that she brought that up? He and I do this often with each other. Like, does this say what I think it says? I love that. Yes, that's such a great idea.
I used to have a colleague that had high communication. We both worked together, and like I'd be like, okay, here's my ideas. And I would dump all this stuff. And he's like, here's what I heard you say. And he would say it in this like brilliant way. And I'm like, I love you.
That's what I needed.
Follow me around and interpret all of the jumbled up mess that's in my head.
That's Chad for me on multiple occasions. Like, and he's like, what I heard, or what I understand, what I think you said. Yeah. And I'm like, no, that wasn't it. So let me try again. Oh yeah, love that communication part, Shaina. I think you're absolutely right. Chad, do you have any insights, inputs?
You know, it's the thought I have actually bridges this conversation about people being unseen and unheard. It also bleeds into the next question that I wanted to pose to Shaina, which is, how do we, what advice do we offer to brand new managers about using their strengths to manage up? And I think the point that ties into both of them is this: understand where the disconnects can happen. Of, I got thinking about it as, if you have a lot of strategic thinking themes, and yet your leader is heavily relationship building, you're not communicating. You're communicating these grand thoughts of advocating for something, or advocating for the team, or advocating for yourself, but they're looking at it through a people lens. They want to know, what's the impact on me? What's the impact on the rest of the organization? What's the impact on my VP? And so I think that to your point about communication, it's you got to be able to match up the communication style of the person you're talking to, not how you would normally communicate. And I think that was the point that I really liked in terms of how to help people be more seen and less unheard, along with how do you get new managers to make sure that they are advocating up further up the organizational chart in a way that benefits their team. You got to communicate in the style of the person above you, regardless of where you are in the hierarchy. So that would be my one big sort of add to what Shaina was saying, because it overlays both.
Absolutely. And I love it, Chad, because it's not even like we spent that much time together that we would know that we were thinking the same thing, but that's where I went too. Like if sometimes if the managers don't hear us or they dismiss us, it's because they don't see what you see. You know, they're not coming at it at the same place as you. And that was exactly where I was going to it. So we got to dig deeper into what is it that the leader is saying or after. The other one that I had was, so many times, and I'm just going to throw it out there, people who try to advocate for the rest of the team, they bring the problem to the manager. This is what I see is going on, and they stop, period. Now offer the solution also. Like, that's where I think like and then they get labeled as like negative because they're like, people aren't understanding you. It's not clear. We don't know why we're doing this, period. Well, then now you're negative and they're going to continue to shut you down. But if you come with this is what I'm seeing, and these are the ways I think that we could address them. What do you see? How do you think we could address those? So I'm kind of getting into that, like advocating up for or managing up, like where I'm like kind of getting into that with the new managers, which I know is your next question. But I think that's the biggest thing, is that one, the communication's off. Absolutely, Shaina. Two, like we're communicating in our way, not necessarily the way the other person needs to hear it. And then three, we're just coming with the problems and not the problems plus a solution. I think people are always much more open-minded when you say, this is the thing I see as a problem. Oh, and by the way, here's like 2 or 3 ideas that we could use to fix it. So I do think that's a wonderful way to be heard and seen more often, is if you're not just coming with the problems.
Shaina,
Negative
I want to put something sort of to the group, because I've heard a nuance on this. Just, come with a solution. Sometimes you can't come to a solution because you don't either have all the facts, or the solution is just sort of outside of your normal thinking pattern. We talk about our talents and our thinking patterns. The nuance I've heard is, if you're not going to bring the solution, at least bring a good representation of the factors that you're considering. What is your current thinking? And I'm just wondering, Shaina, you've done a lot of writing on leadership. I'm just wondering, is that something that has come up in your conversations or with some of your coaching clients, about you don't always have to have the solution, but maybe you need to, definitely to Jen's point about, you don't want to be the negative Nelly every single time, but sometimes the solution is outside of our realm. I'm just wondering if you had thoughts on that, just to see if there's another perspective on it.
Yeah, and I would actually even back it up a little bit and say, what I see most often with new managers is they just don't say a thing. They're just too scared to speak up or even say anything. And so they know there's a problem, they recognize it, it's a challenge for the team, it's impacting the team, but they're kind of in that mindset, that doer mindset of, I'm told what to do and I just do, right? Because they haven't shifted into that leadership mindset yet to actually take that next step and say, hey, you know what? This is a problem, and I just want to raise some awareness to it. I don't know what the solution is, but it's impacting the team in this way. And so sometimes I think even if you can share what the problem is and the impact and how you communicate that, because sometimes your leaders aren't aware of it, right? They probably have several different teams or several different lines of business, and they don't know how the team is feeling. And so just say something, and kind of step into that role of a leader and being able to raise awareness, bring the problem up. I think if you're bringing up a problem every week and there's nothing else going on behind the scenes in terms of productivity, then you might be the negative Nancy on the team, right? Sorry if any of the listeners are named Nancy.
Poor Nancy's and Nellies on this thing. We're just an in it here. So Yeah.
No, I know. But yeah, I think it's stepping into the role of leader and knowing that it is your job to say something. You were promoted for your ability to think strategically and to
Yeah.
problem solve. And so it's not just to do what I'm told, but
Yeah.
yeah, raise the awareness, bring it up.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
So I want to keep going on this track. We've kind of bridged away from the unseen and unheard, and we're already starting to talk about new managers. I'm
Yeah.
curious, in particular, Shaina, as our wonderful guest today, if you have some thoughts on what advice you have about brand new managers using their strengths to manage up. So, we've talked about that sort of middle manager. They've got a team below them. They've recently been promoted to it. You just mentioned that about kind of making that transition out of the individual contributor into a new manager or team leader, people leader role. How do they use their strengths to get going in terms of advocating for that team that they're now leading up into the rest of the organization? Do you have thoughts on things seen be successful, or advice that you like to dole out? I know you've got a great book on it, but but
Yeah.
you know, we're talking about talents and tying in our CliftonStrengths to this conversation. So I'm curious what advice you've got.
Yeah, so something I always think about, like we talked about with managing up, is really influencing, right? You want to influence a different outcome. And when I think about influence, it is the product of credibility and social capital. Credibility
Hmm.
is I do what I say I can do. I deliver on the work that I commit to. I'm credible. I know what I'm talking about. And social capital is likability. How are your relationships through the organization? Because people work with people they like, people promote people they like, people negotiate with people they like, right? So social credibility and social capital are the cornerstone of influence. So if you think about your CliftonStrengths themes, and maybe you don't have influencing themes, it doesn't come naturally to you, but how do you think about how you can use those executing themes to deliver on the work that needs to get done to build your credibility as the
Hmm.
subject matter expert, the best widget maker in the factory, right? And how do you leverage those relationship building talents to build social capital through the organization before you need to use it? So often we think about like, oh gosh, there's a crisis today, and now I've got to lead up and manage, and let me figure out how to do that in the next 30 seconds so that I can go to my boss and tell them what I need, right?
Right.
But think about how you build that social capital and
Hmm.
credibility before you need to use it. And then I think in terms of strategic thinking talents is where are you going to get the best ROI? My one leader used to say this to me all the time, like, which hill are you going to die on, right? Which one is the most important. So with your strategic thinking talents, how can you pick out like which battle am I going to fight and which one am I going to let go? Which one makes a bigger difference for my team? Which one isn't as big of a deal?
Oh,
Oh,
I like the hill. Which hill are you gonna die on for sure?
yeah.
I think she said
Oh,
which sword are you going to die on, but I think
yeah.
hill's a little bit nicer.
I like, do we
Yeah.
have to be stabbed in order to get through this? Yeah,
I
that doesn't
know.
feel as good, right?
I know.
Oh,
Yeah.
so good. I was really loving that like thread you were going through about like if you're not influencing, because there are so few people who have influencing high. And I will say like influencing is really emotionally charged. All the influencing themes are really emotionally charged. And sometimes that's not necessarily the best way. I'm going to say like my
Yeah.
activator is great, but also cannot be so great. So like maybe that's not what I want to use to influence others. Like I'm gonna get excited about things and I'm gonna be the doer because my executing talents are high. And so I think about like understanding how we can use our own talents to help figure out what is going on in the team and how we can like really get to know and understand them to this place where then we know how to like put them on the right seats on the bus, be able to speak about our team to our managers and like, this is what's going on and this is how I think we could move things forward. It's that like again, I feel like a broken record a lot of these episodes where like it's talking about getting to know ourselves and then really getting to know our team. Yeah, and how can you use your talents to get the best out of those that you work with? And I don't know that I have a specific to how we're going to do that. I love that you broke it out in the all the different 4 domains and how they can use those. So that was really good.
I want to build on something both of you have kind of brought up in different ways, but I think the getting to know piece, getting to know your boss or your team manager, even if you're that middle manager, the person above you, the person you report to, how can you use your themes to get to know them really well, whether it's your relationship building themes, or I have Learner that sort of transitioned into a relationship building tool when I need it to. But how do you get to know them? But also, this is where coaches like the 3 of us really come into play, which is we can start to help people understand each other, and we have a shared language. That's one of the great benefits we always talk about with CliftonStrengths, is that this is a shared language. And so now you have a shared language to know your boss. And that goes back to the communication piece that Shaina, I think you really brought up. So I think that there's that piece. The other piece, Jen, you talked about the doing part. And one of the pieces that I wanted to throw out there is, we talk a lot about our talents we can develop into strengths when we aim them at things.
Yeah.
Okay. So we often have our own personal goals, but if we're advocating or trying to manage up for the team, how can we think about our own talents and the talents of our team in pursuit of our leader's goal? So you're managing up by bringing the whole bandwidth of the people that you lead with you to essentially manage up, that you're helping your leader achieve their goals. And that goes to, Shaina, your point about sort of the social capital. If I've already aimed my whole team at my leader's goals,
right,
then boy, I've sort of advocated, I'm showing my value, I'm showing my worth, and my team's worth. And so then when, the problems come up, or, hey, I need this new resource, I'm doing it in pursuit of your most important goals.
Yeah, they trust you.
So it was a tie over between Jen's comment about, doing as sort of an advocation, doing as advocacy versus, not versus, but alongside, aiming at goals, which we know is an important part of strengths-based development. When we not just claim a name, but also aim our talents, that's where they really bring their full strength.
That was an awesome time. I love that.
Yeah.
It was.
Was there anything else you want to add, Shaina? We've had a great conversation. Is there anything else you wanted to add to this conversation? We've asked sort of Jen and I's 4 core questions, but we're always interested in, we have experts like you on for a reason. Is there anything else in particular that you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, I think just find your voice. We covered the gamut today in terms of leading up, but it's finding your voice. It's not being afraid to speak up, being a little bit brave and being a little bit courageous there, even when it's uncomfortable. One of the quotes that I have in my keynote is that comfort is great for sweatpants, not for leadership. So at some point, you're going to have to get a little uncomfortable. Which is what it could feel like when you're leading up and advocating for your team and not sharing where your leader's going to land on that. But it might be a little bit uncomfortable, but that's leadership, and that's where you grow.
Shaina, I'm just going to finish this out by saying thank you very much for joining us. This has been a pleasure to have you. I really appreciate your thoughts and insights. For our listeners, as you consider this episode, we are going to continue to keep encouraging you to play to your strengths.
And be uniquely you.
If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you find your podcasts.